How did a quiet power struggle between Israel and Iran transform into a war that could reshape the world? The moment Benjamin Netanyahu launched Operation Rising Lion, the Middle East reached a breaking point. But behind the explosions lies an older, unresolved question. Who truly controls the future of nuclear power in the region? For decades, the uneasy rivalry between Israel and Iran played out in the shadows, never quiet, spilling into direct confrontation. While the hostility may have appeared frozen in place, the events leading up to 2025 proved that even a cold conflict could quietly ignite. To understand why this happened, we need to go back to the roots of this mutual distrust. Animosity that began not with missiles or tanks, but with uranium. For years, Israel viewed Iran's nuclear ambitions as an existential threat, fearing that an Iranian bomb could tip the balance of power across the Middle East. Iran, however, saw its nuclear program as a matter of independence, a sign that it could defy the dominance of Western nations and assert itself on the global stage. As much as the rivalry grew out of ideology, it was also fueled by specific incidents. Israel's sabotage out of the Natanz uranium enrichment facility in 2021, for example, left physical scars across Iran's nuclear landscape, but also deepened psychological wounds. Iran responded with cyber attacks and calls to ramp up its nuclear enrichment as a means of defiance. These tit-for-tat operations were part of a broad shadow war that played out in secret, until secrecy was no longer an option. The airstrikes Israel carried out in 2024 on Iranian missile production facilities were a major turning point. These strikes, unprecedented in scale, systematically dismantled a key set of air defenses and demonstrated Israel's readiness to act preemptively, sparking outrage in Tehran. Iran's leaders declared the strikes an act of war, one that they vowed to answer in kind. These events were not isolated, but rather part of an accelerating timeline of visible hostility. Covert operations became bolder, moving from silent sabotage to brazen daytime attacks. While diplomats on both sides occasionally spoke of peace through international channels, the efforts proved hollow. Mediation collapsed repeatedly as neither side trusted the other to abide by agreements. Both nations knew how high the stakes were, but rather than pulling back, they doubled down. Israeli leaders demanded stricter international enforcement against Iran's nuclear program. Iran ignored these demands, clinging to what it called its right to enrichment. Tehran would go on to boast about advances in its missile programs, framing them as a response to threats from Tel Aviv. Each move became not just an action, but a challenge, a signal that the tension was tumbling toward open conflict. Domestically, the situation within Israel shifted significantly in October of 2023. After the Hamas attack caught the nation off guard, Netanyahu's government, already under criticism for broader policy directions, was forced to reassess its military dominance. This led to a harder stance at home and abroad, a shift marked by the announcement of Operation Rising Lion as a response to Iranian provocations. It wasn't just a calculated decision to protect borders, but also a political one, aimed at consolidating control during a time of crisis. Washington and other Western allies emphasized caution, but Israel's leadership framed its actions as not just a chance, but a necessity. By June 2025, the tipping point had been reached. After years of shadow strikes, political posturing, and failed negotiations, Israel made a fateful decision. The air suddenly filled with the deafening roar of fighter jets, and Operation Rising Lion targeted over 200 high-value sites across Iran. Crossing into overt warfare transformed the battlefield overnight. But if Israel hoped its actions would simply neutralize the Iranian threat, it's miscalculated. June didn't just bring Israeli air raids, it brought an earthquake of retaliation. Iran's missiles, in turn, lit up the skies of Tel Aviv and Haifa, adding civilian tragedy to a deadly military calculus. On June 13, 2025, as dawn broke over the Middle East, Israel launched one of the boldest military operations in its history, codenamed Operation Rising Lion. This meticulously coordinated attack targeted approximately 200 Iranian sites, ranging from nuclear facilities to advanced military installations. The sheer scale and precision of the strikes signal a shift in Israel's strategy, moving from covert sabotage to open warfare. Using state-of-the-art U.S.-supplied F-35 fighter jets and precision-guided munitions, the strikes were executed with surgical accuracy, leaving Iran reeling in the immediate aftermath. One of the operation's primary targets was the Natanz nuclear facility, the heart of Iran's uranium enrichment program. For years, Natanz had been a focal point of concern for Israel, with its centrifuge halls buried deep underground and fortified against potential airstrikes. Yet, in a matter of hours, Israeli jets incapacitated much of the facility's infrastructure. Reports revealed that key power supplies had been destroyed, a loss that wreaked havoc on the fragile centrifuge systems, causing irreversible damage. The International Atomic Energy Agency later described direct impacts on these enrichment halls, with experts suggesting the strikes could delay Iran's nuclear ambitions by several years. But the damage didn't stop there. The operation extended to military installations linked to Iran's missile development and deployment. High-profile leaders of Iran's Revolutionary Guard were among the casualties, with reports confirming the deaths of several senior figures, including General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, the mastermind behind Iran's missile program. These losses represented a severe blow to the operational capabilities of Iran's military. Among others killed were the intelligence chief of the IRGC and 2 generals, all targeted in an underground command center. Israel's objective was clear: to dismantle both the infrastructure and leadership sustaining Iran's growing military threat. While Israeli officials celebrated the mission's immediate tactical success, the human cost quickly became apparent. Civilians bore much of the brunt of these attacks, particularly in areas where military and civilian infrastructure were intertwined. Iran's UN representative reported 78 deaths and over 320 injuries, with organizations claiming that nearly 40% of the facilities were civilians. Beyond the lives lost, environmental concerns arose following the attack on Natanz. The UN nuclear agency warned of possible contamination risks, adding yet another dimension to an already devastating conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu framed the operation as an act of survival. Tehran is burning, he declared, emphasizing his government's insistence that eradicating Iran's nuclear program was a non-negotiable priority. For Netanyahu, this wasn't just a bold military maneuver, it was a statement to both enemies and allies. He argued that Israel could no longer depend on diplomatic pressures to halt Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons. By framing this strike as a preemptive measure against an existential danger, Netanyahu sought to legitimize the attack on the global stage, even as international criticism began to mount. Iran's retaliation arrived swiftly. Just a day after the operation, Iranian forces unleashed a barrage of ballistic missiles targeting Israeli cities, including Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem. State media in Iran claimed the launch of hundreds of missiles, marks of its deep stockpile, and its ongoing capacity for power protection. On the ground, the impact was immense. Missile strikes caused significant damage to infrastructure while pushing Israeli residents into bomb shelters and halting major areas of civilian life. This immediate counteroffensive exposed the delicate balance of power in the region, where neither side was willing to cede dominance without escalation. Operation Rising Lion, for all its immediate successes, carried consequences far beyond the battlefield. In crippling Iran's nuclear ambitions, Israel ignited an international crisis. Tensions rippled across allied nations. Oil markets reacted with panic, and global leaders scrambled to respond. Meanwhile, the attacks and their aftermath propelled the conflict into its most unstable phase, leaving both nations facing unpredictable outcomes as they exchanged devastating blows. On June 14, 2025, less than 24 hours after Israel's Operation Rising Lion devastated key Iranian facilities, Tehran launched its response. Iranian forces fired a series of missile barrages targeting Israel's largest cities, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem. The attacks demonstrated not only Iran's ability to strike deep into Israel's territory, but also the lengths it was willing to go to retaliate against Israel's bold offensive. According to the Israeli military, 80 ballistic missiles were confirmed to have struck their targets in 2 coordinated waves. However, Iranian state media painted a much different picture, claiming hundreds of missiles had been launched in a decisive show of strength. The conflicting reports reflected not just the battle taking place on the ground, but a parallel war of propaganda. The destruction on the ground in Israel was sobering. In Tel Aviv, several neighborhoods bore the brunt of the missile strikes, with buildings reduced to rubble, fires breaking out across damaged residential areas. One of the most devastating strikes hit an apparent block in the coastal city of Bat Yam. 6 lives were lost there, with victims buried beneath shattered concrete until emergency responders could clear the site. In Ramat Gan, a direct hit resulted in the death of a woman while in Shfela. 24 others were injured, 2 of them critically. An assault sirens filled the air and residents rushed to bomb shelters. The psychological toll of the attacks deepened. For many civilians, the unsettling reality was not just the destruction, but the sudden reminder of how vulnerable cities, even fortified ones, had become. Iran's retaliation wasn't just about inflicting damage, it was also a calculated message. By demonstrating its ability to launch precision strikes on Israeli cities, Tehran reinforced its narrative that it remained resilient despite Israel's efforts to weaken it. Iranian officials framed these missile launches as a symbol of resistance, driving home the point that it retained considerable military capabilities even under duress. More than retaliation, this was also projection. An assertion to Iran's regional rivals and the international community that any aggression would be met with equal or greater force. The escalation left the Middle East profoundly unstable. With no end to hostilities in sight, the region's future seemed precarious, and the global implications only grew. Oil markets remained jittery as traders anticipated further disruptions. Meanwhile, questions about contamination risks from the damaged Natanz facility raised fears beyond the immediate battlefield. The ceasefire of June 2025 paused the violence but solved little. The core conflict, the clash of Israel's survival concerns and Iran's pursuit of power, still simmers beneath the surface. Strategic uncertainty now looms over the region, where destruction and loss have scared cities. And mistrust runs deeper than ever. An Israeli official bluntly warned Iran will pay an unbearably heavy price for firing at civilian areas. Yet Iran insists on its right to retaliation, solidifying its defiance. The region teeters on the edge of renewed conflict, and the question persists: can this fragile peace hold, or will the cycle of hostilities rage on?